everybody. How are you? I've never done anything like this, so I am pretty freaked out and excited, if I may be so honest. So I am here today to talk about blogging and social media and why it has really transformed history. It is literally rewriting history. So I have a little presentation, and first I wanted to make sure that you know a little bit about who we are. Blogher is the largest community of women who blog and use social media. We get together to seek and share advice, information, and recommendations, and we reach now 92 million women a month across blogs and social tools. Thank you. So can I just check, are you seeing the slide that says changing history right now? Okay, thank you. So history, throughout most of known reported history, has been about three things: war, commerce, government. And those things have been male-dominated up until probably the last century. So the voices that we heard, the history that we were learning, the experiences that were taught and handed down, at least in this country, have been mostly about men. And we didn't really have the full picture. And we didn't have a history that was written from the perspective of the everyday person. So for instance, if you think about World War II, there's probably two women I can think of: Anne Frank and German film director Leni Riefenstahl is probably the two women who play a part in World War II's history. But I want you to meet my grandmother. This is my grandmother. She grew up in Czechoslovakia, and in the 30s, she and her husband decided to get out in advance of the Nazis. Her parents wouldn't go with them. They thought it would blow over. And so they immigrated to France. And they lived in France until February of 1940, when my mother was born. And then they realized they needed to get out of France too. And so with a 3-month-old infant, they set off in a car, drove over the Pyrenees, got to Portugal, eventually got on a boat, came to the US, didn't have the right visa, had to go to Brazil, and eventually came back to the US and settled here in Forest Hills, New York, where my mother grew up. I went to Forest Hills High School. Woo woo! All right, that's all I know. That's all I know of my grandmother's history, because she didn't want to talk about it. And we always talked about getting an oral history of what that journey was like, and you know what? We didn't do it. Years later, she died when she was 89. She told me she still dreamed about her parents that were left behind and perished every week, at least once a week. And that was like the next only statement I really knew. And we have lost that history. We've lost that perspective. We have lost that journey. Now I'd like you to meet my mother, and that's me, my wedding day. And that's me in the other picture too. Now she got married, she went to Smith. She got married here at the Pierre Hotel at the age of 21. Right after June, she graduated college, she got married, and she moved to California with my father and had 3 kids by the time she was 27. And according to her, we were awesome kids. Like, it's all rose-colored glasses now. I would like you to know that I myself personally woke up from my naps smiling and laughing. That's the story. That's how awesome a baby I was. But in the 70s, my mom decided she wanted to go to work. Not even go back to work, because she never had worked. She wanted to go to work. And it ultimately led to divorce, because that wasn't what my dad had in mind. And she worked until she was past 70, when she finally retired. And she worked her way up, became the first female vice president at the company she worked for. She worked her way up from a part-time research associate. But you know what she never talks about is what would drive her to change her entire life and give up and sacrifice quite a bit. It was all so awesome, and we were great kids, and everything was hunky-dory. There's more to the story that we don't know. And you know what? All these decades later, she doesn't really remember anymore. she told me after Betty Friedan died, she said, oh, she changed my life. I read The Feminine Mystique, and that's when I decided. I mean, this was decades later that I found this out. So what's happening is that we have stories that have so much resonance, mean so much, and yet we know so little about. And blogs are creating an opportunity for women to share their stories, and they're creating an opportunity for us to know we're not alone. So there are other women out there who are going through various things. You know, there are topics that are affecting women every day that they don't actually feel like they can talk to their neighbors and their friends every day. Maybe it's infertility, or grief and loss, or illness. You know, you don't really want to talk to your neighbor every single day. You don't think they want to hear it. And so it remains a bit of a bottled up inside. There are entire communities online that exist to support women who are going through these things. And it's created a new way of being able to talk. So for instance, if you meet Elise Bauer from Simply Recipes, it's one of the largest food blogs in the world. She has millions of unique readers, and she makes her living doing this. But she started this blog because she came down with chronic fatigue syndrome and had to move back in with her parents in Sacramento, quit her job, and she started the blog to keep from going crazy. And what she found is that she loved it. She loved to share these simple recipes she was learning from her mother and father, and she loved to be a resource, and she loved to help people find simple, easy ways to cook meals for their family. And she's created an entirely new life. Or this is Susan Niebuhr, a real live rocket scientist, worked for NASA, astrophysicist. Came down with a really rare, not as rare as you'd think, form of breast cancer that doesn't present with a lump, infectious breast disease. And in going through her journey, she raised awareness to thousands and thousands of women to go get themselves checked. And she raised money for causes near to this. And she used this as a platform to educate and to activate. And this is Grace Davis, housewife in California, who, like the rest of us in 2005, was watching what was happening in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina and was feeling helpless and was feeling angry and was feeling like this can't be happening. And so she started just sort of surfing around, and she found a woman in Mississippi who posted on Craigslist and said, I have a car and a cell phone, and I can do something, but I don't know what to do. And so they set up a website, and the woman in Mississippi drove around to all the shelters, figured out who was there and what they needed, and then Grace would post it on this blog. And people, and you know, UPS and FedEx and DHL were getting to these shelters before FEMA and before the Red Cross even. And so people in the community online were packing care boxes and shipping them directly to shelters for the people who were there. And they were relevant packages. If the kid was 5 years old, they were getting, or the kid was, 16 months, they were getting diapers the right size to that person. And afterwards, one of the recipients wrote and said, when I got that box and it had something in it that was the right size for my child and what I needed, I knew that I wasn't really alone like I thought I was. That somewhere out there, people cared. And this was using this platform to activate. So what we used to have is what seemed like really deep news. Lots of investigative reporting, lots of journalism going on. But if you look at who were the creators and purveyors of the mainstream media sources, they all looked a lot the same. And they all came from a pretty similar pedigree. So you had depth in one sense, but it was very shallow in another sense. But now you have sites that are built by, for, and about every kind of community. Let me just go back. So if you want to know about the LGBT community from the LGBT community, go to Autostraddle. If you want to know about the East Indian community from the East Indian community, go read Sepia Mutiny. There are sites out there built by and for and about communities who have their own perspective. we don't always have to have a sort of third-party perspective. We can hear it from our own respective horses' mouths. And, oh my God, I'm competing with ambulances and fire trucks. Can you hear me? All right. So this is a new kind of power. It is the power to be heard. It is the power to raise your voice. It is the power to change the way you make your living. It is the power to change the way you activate. It is your power in a new way that is really open to all. You can start using online tools for no money whatsoever, no investment, and start to write about what drives you and what you're passionate about. And it can change the world. These are some examples of situations where it did actually change the world that someone activated online. When 1 million moms wanted to activate against Ellen DeGeneres and JCPenney, well, there was a responsive Facebook response that was saying, let it go, leave it be. When the internet, when they were trying to pass certain laws to censor the internet, a lot of websites, that black square in the lower corner, a lot of websites set their websites to be dark. And it did impact legislation. A woman named Catherine Stone in Atlanta, Georgia, the largest postpartum depression blogger out there, did help pass legislation that makes sure that new moms are screened for postpartum mental health issues. You can activate an audience and you can make a real difference. So the question is, what would you do? What will you do with your platform? How will you make a change? What will you do with this power? Because you don't have to change the world with your blog or social media, but you can. You have the power. And that's, if you walk away with nothing else, you have the power. What will you do with it now that you have it? Thank you.